Ever found yourself in that moment where it feels like everything you say or do is somehow the wrong move? When the person you care about seems to be testing you, dropping little challenges, throwing curveballs, or watching how you react under pressure. It's frustrating, isn't it, that sinking feeling when you wonder, why does it have to feel like a game? But here's the thing, what if these tests aren't just random obstacles? What if they're opportunities to show up as your best self, calm, unshakable, and truly confident? That's where Stoicism comes in. This ancient philosophy, practiced by emperors and thinkers for centuries, isn't just about enduring hardship, it's about mastering your emotions, understanding what's within your control, and navigating life's challenges with unbreakable poise. And when it comes to dating, Stoicism isn't just useful, it's transformative. Imagine this, instead of scrambling for the right words when she throws you a challenge, you respond with quiet assurance. Instead of overthinking her mixed signals, you see them clearly, not as threats, but as moments to demonstrate your strength. Stoicism teaches you how to do exactly that. It's not about playing mind games or suppressing your feelings. It's about cultivating a mindset where you're never caught off guard, where you meet every test with clarity and purpose. The best part, this isn't some trendy dating hack. It's timeless wisdom that works because it's rooted in human nature. The same principles that helped Marcus Aurelius rule an empire can help you navigate the complexities of modern relationships with grace and confidence. Today, we're diving into 25 powerful ways Stoicism equips you to pass her tests, not by manipulating outcomes, but by becoming the kind of man who doesn't need to. You'll learn how to stay centered when emotions run high, how to communicate with unshakable authenticity, and why the strongest response to a test isn't reaction, it's equilibrium. Whether it's handling silence, deflecting provocations, or showing up with unwavering presence, Stoicism gives you the tools to turn tension into trust. This isn't about changing who you are, it's about revealing the best version of yourself. So if you're ready to stop guessing and start mastering these moments, let's begin. One of the most powerful tools Stoicism gives you is the ability to embrace emotional detachment, not in the cold, unfeeling way it might sound, but as a superpower to stay grounded when emotions try to hijack your clarity. Picture this, she throws a casual comment your way, something that could easily be taken as a slight or a challenge. Maybe she's testing to see if you'll get defensive or if you'll suddenly seek her approval. The untrained mind jumps straight into reaction mode, heart rate spikes, thoughts race, and suddenly you're not responding, you're just reacting. But Stoicism flips the script. It teaches you to pause, to create just enough space between the stimulus and your response to ask one critical question. Is this within my control? That's the heart of the Stoic dichotomy of control. Her words, her moods, even her tests, they're external. They're not yours to command, but your interpretation, your patience, your decision to act from a place of calm rather than impulse. That's entirely up to you. Think of it like standing in the ocean. Waves hit you, some small, some big. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to keep your balance. Emotional detachment isn't about not caring. It's about choosing not to be swept away. When she throws a curveball, instead of scrambling to fix it or prove yourself, you simply observe. You let the moment land without letting it shake you. This is where Stoicism transforms tension into strength. Imagine her saying something deliberately vague, like, "I guess you're just busy with other things now." The old you might rush to explain, to reassure, to seek her validation. The Stoic you recognize the test for what it is, an invitation to lose your footing. So you stay steady, maybe you smile and say, "I make time for what matters," without over-explaining. That quiet confidence speaks louder than any anxious reaction ever could. Marcus Aurelius put it perfectly. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Every test she throws your way is really just an opportunity to practice that power. The more you exercise this muscle of emotional detachment, the less her tests or anyone's will rattle you, and ironically, that's often the very thing that makes her respect you more. Because people who can't be emotionally manipulated, they're the ones who stand out. They're the ones who pass the test without even trying. Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's a strategic tool, one the Stoics mastered centuries ago. Think about the last time someone tried to provoke you with a loaded question or a backhanded compliment. The instinct is to fire back, to defend, to fill the air with explanations. But what if the most powerful response was saying nothing at all? Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "To what shall you direct your attention? Only to this, your mind, your actions, and the words you choose not to say." That's the essence of Stoic silence, not passive but purposeful. When she drops a subtle test, maybe a sarcastic remark like, "Oh, so you do remember I exist," your silence becomes the ultimate display of composure. You're not ignoring her, you're refusing to play the game on her terms. This isn't about stonewalling or emotional withdrawal. It's about recognizing that not every provocation deserves a reaction. Silence forces the other person to sit with their own words. It shifts the dynamic. Suddenly, she's the one wondering why her remark didn't land, why it didn't trigger the expected response, and that's where your strength becomes undeniable. The Stoics called this apatheia, a state where external jabs don't derail your inner peace. Picture this: she says something deliberately acidic, like, "I figured you'd bail on these plans eventually." The old you might rush to justify yourself, pleading, "No, I really wanted to come." The Stoic version of you let the words hang. Maybe you nod or even smile, but you don't hand her the satisfaction of watching you scramble. That silence speaks volumes. "I'm unfazed by your attempt to rattle me." Marcus Aurelius modeled this perfectly. As emperor, he faced constant manipulation, flattery, and outright betrayal. His solution, the best revenge, is not to be like your enemy. In modern terms, that means when someone tries to drag you into drama, silence is your shield. It's not avoidance, it's elevation. You're choosing not to descend to pettiness, and in doing so, you reveal her test for what it really is, a bid for control. Here's the practical truth: silence isn't empty, it's loaded with meaning. It communicates that you're secure enough not to need the last word, that your worth isn't up for debate. Try it next time she pushes your buttons. Instead of rising to the bait, let the pause linger. Watch how discomfort shifts to her side of the table, because people who need reactions are the ones seeking validation. And those who don't, they're the ones who have already won. Here's a radical reframe for you. What if every test she throws your way isn't an obstacle, but fuel? The Stoics had a game-changing perspective on this. Epictetus, the philosopher born a slave, put it bluntly: "The obstacle is the way." He didn't mean that challenges feel good. He meant they're the raw material for building unshakable resilience. Think about it. When she pushes your buttons with a sudden cold shoulder or a loaded question, your immediate reaction might be frustration. Why is she making this difficult? But flip the script. That moment isn't just a test, it's a gym for your character. Take the classic, "I bet you say that to everyone" line. On the surface, it's skepticism, maybe even a jab at your sincerity. The insecure response, defensiveness. "No, I don't. You're special." But the Stoic approach. Gratitude, seriously. That comment is a gift because it's showing you exactly where you can level up. Instead of resisting it, lean in. A calm, playful reply like, "Only the ones who ask for it," does two things. It disarms the test and proves you're not rattled. You've turned her skepticism into a moment of connection. That's the alchemy of reframing. This mindset isn't just about relationships, it's how the Stoics survived exile, betrayal, even war. Seneca wrote letters from banishment praising the solitude that forced him to deepen his philosophy. Marcus Aurelius ruled Rome during a plague, using the chaos to practice patience. Their secret, they didn't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" They asked, "What does this make possible?" Apply that to dating, her mixed signals, a chance to practice emotional independence. Her hot and cold behavior, training for maintaining your center when others waver. Here's the key: reframing isn't positive thinking, it's strategic thinking. When you stop seeing her tests as personal attacks and start seeing them as drills, something shifts. You stop fearing them, you start anticipating them. Because every challenge is a chance to flex your Stoic muscles, patience, humor, unwavering self-assurance, and the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, you'll catch yourself welcoming the tests not because you enjoy mind games, but because you know each one is sculpting you into the kind of man who doesn't just pass her tests, he redefines them. True confidence doesn't come from getting her approval, it comes from knowing you don't need it. That's the Stoic secret to unshakable self-assurance. Think about the last time you felt thrown off by a test. Maybe she cancelled plans last minute with a vague excuse, or she dropped a comment like, "You're not like other guys I've dated." Your stomach tightened, didn't it? That tension, it's not about her, it's about the hidden question beneath it. Am I enough? Stoicism cuts straight to the core of that fear. Seneca put it best: if you wish to be loved, love yourself first. Not in a selfish way, but in the way a tree stands firm. Not because it's begging the wind to stop, but because its roots run deep. Here's the shift: Stoics measure confidence by virtue, not validation. External praise, unpredictable. Your integrity, discipline, and resilience, those are yours to command. Picture two men. One panics when she pulls back, texting frantically to prove his worth. The other stays grounded, not because he's indifferent, but because his self-worth isn't tied to her moods. Which one commands respect? The irony is, the less you need her to confirm your value, the more she'll recognize it. That's the power of what Seneca called inner citadel, a fortress of self-trust no outside force can breach. Let's make this practical. Say she hits you with the classic test: "I don't think you're serious about me." The insecure response is pleading: "No, I am. Give me a chance." The Stoic response: quiet ownership. That's your call to make. I know what I bring. No desperation, no bargaining, just a calm acknowledgement that her opinion doesn't define you. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment. When your confidence stems from living by your principles, showing up honestly, keeping your word, respecting yourself, her tests become irrelevant. You're not trying to pass them, you're operating beyond them. Marcus Aurelius faced endless sycophants in Rome, all vying for his favor, his antidote. It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. That's the trap. The moment you prioritize her perception over your own self-respect, you hand her the keys to your confidence. But when you anchor your worth in actions, you control how you treat people, how you handle adversity. The standards you refuse to compromise, something shifts. Her hot and cold behavior, it's just weather, you're the climate. This is why Stoicism is the ultimate confidence hack. It's not about puffing your chest or pretending you don't care. It's about building a version of yourself so solid, so rooted in purpose, that no test can shake your foundation. And when she sees that, that's when the dynamic changes. Not because you played the game better, but because you showed her there was never a game to begin with. Modern life runs on instant gratification. Swipe right for attention, click for validation, react in seconds to every emotional trigger. But what if her tests are revealing something deeper, not about her, but about your relationship with time, patience, and the discipline to wait without desperation? The Stoics didn't just preach delayed gratification, they engineered their lives around it. Seneca slept on hard beds, Musonius Rufus ate simple meals. Why? To train themselves to want less, not because suffering was noble, but because freedom from urgency was power. Apply that to dating. When she takes hours to text back or says, "I'll let you know about plans," your impulse might be to nudge, to seek closure, to fill the silence with your anxiety. But Stoicism offers a better path, one where discomfort becomes your teacher. Take voluntary discomfort, a cornerstone Stoic practice. It's not about punishing yourself. It's about inoculating yourself against the fear of lack. Skip the extra drink when out with friends. Take a cold shower. Leave your phone behind for an afternoon. These small acts rewire your brain to sit with unease, which means when she throws the classic "I need space" test, you don't panic. You've already practiced the art of sitting still in uncertainty. Epictetus, who trained Roman elites, put it bluntly: is freedom anything else than the right to live as we wish, then no one is free who can't control their impulses. That's the key. Her tests aren't just about attraction, they're about exposing who's really in charge, your principles or your impulses. Imagine this scenario: she cancels a date last minute with a flimsy excuse. The untrained mind spirals. Was it something I said? Should I double text? But the Stoic response starts with a question: what if I did nothing, not out of spite but sovereignty? You've already practiced the muscle of restraint. You know the difference between pursuing what you value and clinging to what you fear losing. So you reply with a simple "no worries, another time," and redirect your energy to something meaningful. No guilt trips, no passive aggression, just the quiet confidence of someone who's not ruled by immediate emotional payoffs. This is where Stoicism flips the script on modern dating's instant reward culture. The man who can delay gratification isn't just patient, he's unpredictable in the best way. He doesn't rise to every bait because he's playing a longer game, the game of self-mastery. When she says, "You're not like other guys, you actually wait for me to reach out," it's not a coincidence, it's cause and effect. By embracing small daily acts of discipline, you're building the kind of composure that makes her tests feel trivial. Because the ultimate test was never about her, it was about whether you could endure the tension of not knowing and still choose to act from integrity, not insecurity. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing because it requires you to stay ready and steady for sudden blows." Those blows might be her mixed signals, her lukewarm responses, or her silence, but delayed gratification is your shield. It's the quiet reminder that your worth isn't measured in her reply speed, and your peace isn't for sale to the highest bidder of attention. The more you practice sitting with discomfort voluntarily, the more you'll realize her tests weren't obstacles, they were invitations to prove you'd already outgrown them. Have you ever stood on a mountaintop and looked down at the world below? How small everything seems: the cars like toys, the houses like specks, the problems that felt enormous suddenly reduced to their true scale. That's the essence of the Stoic view from above, a mental exercise designed to dissolve tension by zooming out, way out. When her tests feel personal, when a sharp comment or sudden distance makes your pulse race, this technique is your secret weapon. Imagine floating high above the scene, watching the two of you from a distance. That argument, a tiny blip in the vast timeline of your life, her mood swing. A fleeting ripple in the ocean of human interaction. The Stoics didn't just suggest this perspective, they trained in it daily because they knew what feels urgent up close often looks trivial from altitude. Here's how it works in practice. Say she hits you with the classic, "You're just like all the others" line. Your gut reaction might be defensiveness, "No, I'm different." Or worse, desperation to prove it. But pause, close your eyes for just a second. Picture the room you're in from the ceiling, then the building from the sky, then the city from space. Suddenly, her words aren't a verdict on your worth. They're just words passing through the air like leaves in the wind. Marcus Aurelius used this exercise to govern an empire, writing, "Think of the whole of existence, how infinitesimal your share of it." That's not nihilism, it's liberation. When you see her test from cosmic distance, you regain the power to choose your response, not just react. The brilliance of this technique lies in its double effect. First, it shrinks the test's emotional weight, but second, and this is critical, it reveals the pattern behind her behavior. From ground level, her mixed signals feel uniquely personal. From 10,000 feet, you might spot her own insecurities, her past hurts, the universal human dance of push and pull. That's why Epictetus taught his students to step outside the drama, not to dismiss others, but to see them clearly. When you observe her tests from this vantage point, you stop taking them personally. You start responding with curiosity instead of urgency. Try this today. Next time she throws a curveball, ghosting, sarcasm, a sudden change of plans, don't engage immediately. Take 3 deep breaths and mentally pull back. See the moment as a historian might 100 years from now. 2 people navigating the messy, beautiful complexity of human connection. That slight delay, that moment of perspective, changes everything. Because when you stop treating her tests like life or death struggles, she stops seeing you as someone who can be baited. And that's when the real shift happens. You're no longer a player in her game. You're the quiet observer who's already moved beyond it. There's a moment in every test where you get to decide who's really in charge, your virtues or your ego. The Stoics didn't just admire wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, they weaponized them. These 4 cardinal virtues weren't abstract ideals, they were tools for navigating life's provocations with unshakable integrity. Picture this: she drops a comment designed to poke at your insecurities, like, "I didn't think you'd actually follow through." The reactive man hears an insult and lashes out or pleads for approval. The virtuous man, he pauses, he asks, what would wisdom do here? Not the false wisdom of clever comebacks, but the real kind, the clarity to see her comment for what it is, a reflection of her own doubts, not your worth. Take Cato the Younger, the Stoic who became a living legend in Rome. When political rivals spat insults at him in the Senate, he didn't retaliate. He listened, then returned to reading scrolls mid-debate, not out of disrespect, but because he refused to let pettiness dictate his actions. That's courage in Stoic terms, not the absence of fear, but the choice to act rightly despite discomfort. Apply that to her tests. When she pushes with "you're too intense," courage isn't doubling down or shrinking back. It's standing firm in your authenticity without needing her to validate it. "I'd rather be fully myself than half-loved for pretending," carries more weight than any argument. Justice, the 3rd virtue, is where most men stumble. They think it's about fairness. If she's cold, I'll match her energy. But Stoic justice is different. It's giving others what they deserve, not what they deliver. When she's distant, justice asks, does she deserve my bitterness or my patience? Cato faced betrayal after betrayal, yet he never abandoned his principles. Even as enemies plotted his downfall, he treated them with civility, not because they earned it, but because he valued his own character too much to compromise. Then there's temperance, the unsung hero of Stoic virtue. It's not about suppression, it's about proportion. Say she hits you with the classic, "You're being clingy," after a single text. Temperance whispers, respond to the intent, not the insult. A measured, "I'll give you space, let me know when you're ready to talk," demonstrates self-control without surrender. Cato's life was full of these moments. At feasts, he'd watch others gorge themselves while he ate just enough to sustain, not indulge. That same discipline applies here. Emotional temperance means engaging with her tests enough to show care, but never so much that you lose yourself. Here's the secret the Stoics knew. Virtues aren't just moral guidelines, they're strategic armor. When you lead with wisdom, you see her tests as puzzles, not threats. Courage lets you hold your ground without aggression. Justice keeps you kind even when she's not. And temperance ensures your reactions are deliberate, not desperate. The result, you stop passing her tests and start setting the standard. Because the man who lives by virtue doesn't just win her respect, he redefines the game. What if the very thing you fear, losing her interest, failing her tests, could actually become your greatest source of strength? Stoicism offers a counterintuitive tool for this: negative visualization. It's not about pessimism or self-sabotage. It's about preemptively facing what scares you so that when the moment comes, you're not paralyzed by fear, you're prepared. Seneca, who wrote letters on resilience while exiled to a barren island, put it plainly, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Here's how this works in practice. Close your eyes and imagine the worst-case scenario. She ghosts you after a disagreement, she laughs at your vulnerability, she walks away. Sit with that image. Feel the weight of it. Now ask yourself, could I survive this? The answer is always yes. And suddenly, the power of that test evaporates. This technique isn't just theoretical, it's neuromuscular training for emotional resilience. Think of it like a fire drill. When alarms blare in an office building, no one panics. Why? Because they've practiced the exact scenario that once triggered fear. Negative visualization does the same for your mind. By mentally rehearsing rejection or disappointment, you're inoculating yourself against the panic that comes with uncertainty. Picture this: she suddenly pulls back after weeks of closeness. The untrained mind spirals into, "What did I do wrong?" But the Stoic, he's already walked this path in his imagination. He knows the sting, but he also knows it won't break him. Seneca used this method daily. Before embracing his wife, he'd remind himself, "She is mortal. She could be gone tomorrow." This wasn't morbid, it was liberating. By confronting impermanence head-on, he savored the present without clinging to it. Apply this to her tests. When you imagine her shrugging off your affection or dismissing your efforts, you're not inviting pain, you're defanging it. The next time she says something like, "Maybe we're just wasting each other's time," you won't flinch. You'll respond with quiet assurance because you've already survived that moment 100 times in your mind. Here's the paradox: the less you need a specific outcome, the more attractive you become. Negative visualization reveals this truth. When you've mentally rehearsed losing her, you stop orbiting her approval. You stop molding yourself to pass unspoken tests. Instead, you show up as someone who's already reckoned with the worst and found himself unbroken. That's the kind of presence that commands respect, not because you're indifferent, but because you've proven to yourself that your worth isn't negotiable. Epictetus, the philosopher who trained people in the art of mental freedom, had a brutal but effective exercise. He told his students to handle their favorite ceramic cup like something already shattered. Why? When it breaks, you'll remember it was never truly yours to keep. That's the mindset shift. Her attention, her validation, they were always on loan. Negative visualization doesn't teach you to let go prematurely. It teaches you to hold loosely, so when tests come, you're not grasping at reassurance. You're standing firmly in the knowledge that no outcome can diminish you. Try this tonight. Spend 5 minutes visualizing her walking away. Sit with the discomfort until it loses its edge. Then ask, what would I do next? You'll realize the answer isn't despair. It's rebuilding, refocusing, moving forward. And that realization, that's the birth of real confidence. Because tests only have power over those who haven't imagined failing them. But you've already passed by confronting the fear before it ever had a chance to own you. There's a fundamental shift that happens when you stop asking, "Did this work?" and start asking, "Was this right?" And it's the difference between anxiety and unshakable confidence. The Stoics called this the discipline of action, the practice of focusing solely on what you can control, your intentions, your efforts, your integrity, while letting go of the outcomes. Picture this: you plan a thoughtful date, something tailored to her interests. She seems distracted, barely engages, and leaves early. The outcome-focused mind spirals. Was it something I said? Did I misread the situation? But the Stoic mind, it stays grounded in one question. Did I show up as the kind of man I respect? That's the pivot point. This isn't just philosophical theory, it's liberation from the approval-seeking trap. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's the heart of intention over outcome. When you text her with genuine warmth, not to manipulate a reply, but because kindness is who you are, her response or lack thereof becomes irrelevant. When you speak your truth without watering it down to placate her, you're no longer performing for her validation. You're living by your code, the irony. That's precisely what makes you magnetic. People can sense when your actions come from a place of authenticity, not desperation. Consider the classic test. She throws a curveball like, "I don't think you're really over your ex." The outcome-obsessed response is defensive. "No, I swear I am." Because the goal is to convince her, but the intention-focused response, calm clarity. "I understand why you'd wonder that. All I can say is I'm here because I want to be." No begging, no over-explaining, just truth. The outcome isn't guaranteed. She might still doubt you. But your self-respect remains intact because you acted from integrity, not fear. That's Stoicism in action. Epictetus, who trained students in this very mindset, put it bluntly, "Some things are up to us, some are not." Your effort, yours, her reaction, hers. When you internalize this, something profound happens. Her tests lose their power to destabilize you. You stop seeing every interaction as a pass/fail exam and start seeing it as a series of choices to align with your values. Take initiative because you're someone who goes after what he wants, not because you're terrified of losing her. Speak your mind because honesty matters to you, not because you're strategizing to impress. Here's the practical shift. At the end of each interaction, ask yourself not, "Did she like me?" but "Did I like how I showed up?" That subtle reframe changes everything. Suddenly, her mixed signals aren't verdicts, they're data. Her hot and cold behavior isn't a judgment on your worth, it's a reflection of her own readiness. And that's the ultimate freedom, because when your self-esteem isn't chained to her reactions, you're no longer a contestant in her game, you're the one setting the terms. Seneca, who faced betrayal, exile, and political intrigue, left us a timeless reminder: the wise man is content with himself. That doesn't mean isolation. It means his joy isn't borrowed from others' approval. Apply this to dating. When you focus on being the man who acts with sincerity, patience, and courage regardless of her responses, you're no longer passing tests. You're transcending them, and the woman worth keeping, she'll recognize that strength instantly, because the man who isn't afraid to lose her is often the one she realizes she can't afford to let go. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who faced exile and ridicule with unwavering calm, once said, "If you endure hardship with patience, it becomes easy. If you resist it, it remains hard." That's the essence of developing a thick skin, not by numbing yourself to emotion, but by changing how you interpret the slights, tests, and provocations thrown your way. Think about the last time she made a backhanded comment like, "You're surprisingly confident for someone like you." The sting wasn't in the words themselves, it was in the meaning you assigned them. That's where Stoicism flips the script. It teaches you to strip away the layers of personalization and see criticism for what it really is: noise. Musonius didn't just preach this, he lived it. When Emperor Nero banished him to a barren island, his students begged him to protest. His response: he treated exile like a sabbatical, turning rocky soil into a garden and lecturing to anyone who'd listen. The lesson: hardship only has power if you crown it with your attention. Apply that to her tests. When she needles you with "I expected more from you," the untrained ego hears a verdict. The Stoic hears an opinion, one that says more about her expectations than your worth. You don't have to internalize every arrow shot in your direction. Here's the practical shift. Imagine her words as pebbles hitting a suit of armor. They make sound, but they don't pierce. That armor isn't arrogance, it's the disciplined understanding that other people's judgments are their business, not yours. Epictetus, who studied under Musonius, put it perfectly. If someone handed your body to a passerby, you'd be outraged, yet you hand your mind to anyone who insults you. Next time she drops a casual grenade like, "You're not usually my type," don't hand her your self-esteem in exchange. Let the comment hang in the air unanswered. Your silence isn't defeat, it's your refusal to let her words take up rent-free space in your head. This isn't about pretending criticism doesn't exist. It's about recognizing that not all criticism deserves a home in your psyche. Musonius trained his students to distinguish between constructive feedback, which helps you grow, and manipulative jabs designed to throw you off balance. When she says, "You're too sensitive," after you call out her mixed signals, that's not feedback. That's a test to see if you'll backtrack to soothe her ego. The Stoic response, a calm, "I'd rather be honest than convenient," followed by the confidence to stand in that truth. The thick-skinned Stoicism builds isn't a callus, it's a filter. It lets through what's useful self-reflection, growth, and leaves behind what's not mind games, manufactured drama. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing, "It's silly to try to escape other people's faults. They're inescapable, just try to escape your own." When her tests come, ask yourself, is this about me or her? Most of the time, you'll find they're projections of her own insecurities. The woman who says, "You care too much," is often the one terrified of caring at all. Musonius' greatest lesson wasn't just enduring criticism, it was rendering it irrelevant. He taught that the more you root your identity in actions you control your integrity, your resilience, the less power external opinions hold. Try this: the next time she throws a barb your way, pause. Picture Musonius on that rocky island, teaching philosophy to seagulls because he refused to let exile define him. Then ask, does this comment deserve to change how I see myself? The answer is always no, because the thicker your skin, the quieter her tests become, until all you hear is your own unshakable voice. Ever notice how your mind can turn a single text message into an hour-long interrogation of every possible meaning? She takes a few extra minutes to reply, and suddenly you're replaying past conversations, predicting future rejections, spinning stories that have nothing to do with the present moment. This is where Stoic mindfulness, what Marcus Aurelius called living as if each day were your last, becomes your secret weapon. It's not about emptying your mind or chasing Zen. It's about anchoring yourself so firmly in the now that her tests lose their power to drag you into imaginary battles. The Stoics had a name for this, prosoch, the art of vigilant attention. Picture a warrior in the middle of a storm. He doesn't waste energy cursing the weather that's past or fearing the winds that might come. He focuses on standing steady right now. That's the mindset. When she throws a curveball, say a sudden shift in tone or an ambiguous comment, your job isn't to decode hidden meanings or future outcomes. Your job is to respond to what's actually in front of you, not the stories your anxiety spins. Marcus Aurelius scribbled reminders to himself like, "Confine yourself to the present," and "Don't let the future disturb you." He wasn't dismissing planning, he was attacking the paralysis of overanalysis. Here's how this works in practice. She says something vague like, "We'll see how things go." The untrained mind races. Does she mean she's losing interest? Is this a soft rejection? The Stoic mind, it hears the words as they are, no more, no less. You might respond with a simple, "Sounds good, looking forward to it," and then let the moment pass. No frantic follow-ups, no mental replay loops, just the quiet discipline of treating the present as enough. This isn't indifference, it's the opposite. It's giving the moment your full attention instead of fracturing it with hypotheticals. The irony is, staying present often reveals what overthinking obscures. When you're not lost in interpreting her every move, you start noticing what's actually happening. That cold response you dissected for hours, maybe she was just tired. The delayed reply that made you question everything, perhaps her phone died. The more you practice prosoch, the clearer it becomes. Most tests aren't even tests. They're ordinary moments inflated by your own narrative. Marcus Aurelius put it best, you don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. Try this today. The next time she says or does something that triggers your overanalyzing reflex, pause. Feel your feet on the ground. Take one deep breath and ask, what's actually happening here? Not what it might mean, not what it could lead to, just the bare facts of the moment. That split-second anchor is often enough to short-circuit the anxiety spiral. Because here's the truth no one tells you. The man who stays present doesn't just pass her tests, he becomes immune to them. When you're not living in her hypothetical futures or your imagined pasts, there's nothing to manipulate. There's just you, calm, grounded, and utterly unshakable. Imagine standing completely naked in front of someone, no masks, no pretenses, just raw authenticity. That's the power of owning your imperfections without flinching, and it's one of the most underrated ways to pass her tests with flying colors. The Stoics didn't just tolerate flaws, they revered them as portals to growth. Epictetus, the philosopher who transformed his enslavement into a masterclass on freedom, put it bluntly: if someone tells you that you don't know something, admit it freely. That's how knowledge begins. That's the mindset shift. Most men crumble under tests like "you're kind of arrogant sometimes" because they hear an attack. The Stoic hears an invitation to drop the act and lean into radical self-honesty. Here's the paradox: when you stop defending your flaws, they lose their power to undermine you. Picture this scenario. She calls you out with "you always interrupt people." The insecure response, justifications: "No, I don't, you're exaggerating." Or worse, counterattacks: "Well, you never let me finish." But the Stoic approach, direct acknowledgement: "You're right, it's something I'm working on." No groveling, no shame, just factual ownership. That level of self-awareness is disarming. It shows her you're not fragile enough to need delusions of perfection. Epictetus trained his students to welcome criticism like a doctor diagnosing an illness. The wound can't heal if you refuse to admit it exists. This isn't about self-deprecation. It's about sovereignty over your growth. The woman who says you're bad at expressing feelings isn't insulting you, she's handing you a mirror. The Stoic doesn't smash that mirror in defiance, he studies it. Maybe he replies, "I appreciate you saying that, I'll try to be more open." That simple admission does two things. It deflates the tension of the test and positions you as someone secure enough to evolve. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "I search myself for what tears me apart so I can stitch it back together." Apply that to dating. Every critique she offers isn't a verdict, it's free data on where you can level up. But here's where most men miss the mark. They confuse owning imperfections with performing humility. "Oh, I'm such a mess, you're too good for me," isn't Stoic, it's covert manipulation, fishing for reassurance. True ownership means stating the flaw without begging for absolution. When she says, "You can be insensitive," you don't theatrically pledge to do better. You say, "I hear you, I'll pay attention to that." Then, and this is critical, you actually do. The Stoics measured character by actions, not apologies. Epictetus' students practiced this daily. They'd publicly list their shortcomings, not to wallow, but to desensitize themselves to the sting of ego. Try it yourself. Next time she points out a flaw, resist the knee-jerk defense. Thank her, write it down, ask yourself, is there truth here? If yes, craft a plan not to win her approval, but to become a better man. Because the ultimate irony, the less you need to be perfect, the more trustworthy you become. And the man who owns his rough edges, he's the one she stops testing, because he's already proven he's brave enough to face them. How many times have you caught yourself staring at a text message, trying to decipher some hidden meaning that isn't there, or replaying a conversation in your head, convinced her offhand comment was actually a secret signal? Here's the brutal truth Stoicism forces us to confront. Mind reading isn't just exhausting, it's arrogance disguised as anxiety. The Stoics had zero patience for this mental trap. Epictetus laid it out plainly. If someone irritates you, it's your own opinion irritating you. That irritation doesn't come from her ambiguous behavior, it comes from the story you're writing about it. Think about the last test she threw your way. Maybe she cancelled plans with a vague, "something came up." The untrained mind races. Is she losing interest? Did I do something wrong? Is she seeing someone else? Notice what's happening here. You're not reacting to reality, you're reacting to the fictional subplot you've created. Stoicism slams the brakes on this spiral with one simple question. What do I actually know for certain? Not what you feel, not what you suspect, just the cold, hard facts. She cancelled, that's it. Everything else is your imagination masquerading as insight. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal reminder for exactly this. Don't extrapolate. When your date seems distracted, don't extrapolate that she's bored with you. She might just have a work deadline gnawing at her focus. When she takes hours to reply, don't extrapolate disinterest. Her phone might be dead, or she might simply be living her life. The Stoic approach is radical in its simplicity. Engage only with observable behavior, not the shadow theater of assumed motives. Here's why this works. Mind reading isn't just inaccurate, it's self-sabotage. Let's say she tests you with "you're awfully quiet tonight." If you've already decided she's implying you're boring, you'll either overcompensate with forced energy or shut down completely. But if you take the statement at face value, you might simply reply, "just enjoying the conversation," with a relaxed smile. No defense, no overthinking, just presence. That's the power of resisting the mind-reading trap. You stop responding to ghosts and start engaging with what's real. The ancient Stoics trained for this like athletes. When a stranger insulted them, they didn't assume malice, they considered alternatives. Maybe the man had a toothache, maybe he'd just received bad news. This deliberate withholding of judgment is your secret weapon against tests. The next time she says something like, "I wouldn't expect you to understand," don't assume she's questioning your intelligence. Maybe she's expressing her own frustration clumsily. The moment you demand clarity instead of inventing subtext, her tests lose their power to unsettle you. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, had a famous practice. When his student reported that someone was speaking poorly of him, Zeno replied, "He must not know me very well, or he'd have worse things to say." That's the attitude to cultivate. When you catch yourself scripting her inner monologue, pause, remind yourself you're not a psychic, you're a man dealing with observable actions. And the less you clutter those actions with imagined narratives, the more clearly you'll see the tests for what they really are. Not verdicts on your worth, but invitations to practice discernment. The woman worth your time, she'll respect you more for needing no explanations than she ever could for begging hers. There's a moment when frustration flares, when her words or actions cut just deep enough to make your pulse quicken and your jaw tighten. Maybe she drops a dismissive comment like, "You're overreacting," or compares you to an ex in a way that feels deliberately provoking, that flash of heat. It's natural, but here's where Stoicism offers a superpower, the ability to feel that fire without letting it consume you. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who wrote the definitive guide on anger, called this the balance of passion and reason. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about ensuring your reactions align with your principles rather than your impulses. Picture this scenario. She deliberately needles you in front of friends, saying something like, "He gets so possessive if I talk to other guys." The untrained response, defensiveness, "That's not true." Or worse, simmering resentment that leaks out in passive aggression later. But Seneca's approach is different. He taught that anger is brief insanity, a temporary loss of agency where emotion hijacks judgment. The Stoic doesn't deny the sting, he creates space between the sting and the response. Instead of snapping back, he might pause, then reply with measured calm. Interesting perspective. I'd say protective and possessive are two different things. No heat, no retreat, just unshakable clarity. This balance isn't just about avoiding arguments, it's about maintaining respect. Seneca observed that no one respects the man who can't control himself. When she throws a test designed to provoke, your ability to stay composed doesn't just diffuse the tension. It reveals a depth of character that's inherently attractive. Think of it like a dance. If she steps on your foot, you don't stomp on hers in return. You adjust your rhythm without breaking stride. That's the essence of emotional regulation, acknowledging the misstep without letting it derail the connection. The practical tool here is what Seneca called the pause. Before reacting, ask yourself 3 questions. Is this worth responding to? Is my response proportionate? Does this reflect who I choose to be? Imagine her teasing you with, "You're just like my terrible ex." The knee-jerk reaction might be, "Then why are you with me?" But the Stoic pause shifts the dynamic. Maybe you counter with light humor. "Sounds like you have a type," or quiet curiosity. "What makes you say that?" Either way, you've refused to let her dictate your emotional state. Seneca's most radical insight was that anger is always a choice, even when it feels automatic. He wrote, "We are often more frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than reality." When she tests you with volatility, sudden silence, sharp tones, unfair accusations, remember, your anger won't correct her behavior. But your equanimity, that might just give her pause, because the man who stays grounded in a storm isn't just passing her test. He's showing her what real strength looks like. And that's a lesson no provocation can undo. Boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges built with respect, and Stoicism gives you the blueprint. When she pushes limits, maybe with a dismissive comment like, "You're too sensitive," or a habit of canceling plans last minute, the untrained response swings between 2 extremes, swallowing the disrespect or firing back with equal harshness. But Stoic justice offers a third path: firmness without cruelty, clarity without contempt. Think of it as emotional jujitsu. You don't absorb the blow or attack in return. You redirect the energy toward mutual respect. Marcus Aurelius modeled this perfectly. As emperor, he faced constant attempts to manipulate his time and attention. His solution: you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. But he didn't ignore provocations, he addressed them with disciplined detachment. Apply that to her tests. When she crosses a line, say, mocking your values in front of friends, the Stoic response isn't silence or sarcasm. It's a calm, private conversation later. "I respect your perspective, but jokes at my expense don't work for me." No ultimatums, no anger, just an unshakable statement of where you stand. This is where Stoic justice shines. It's not about punishing her for testing you. It's about honoring yourself enough to say, "This far, no further." Epictetus, who endured slavery without losing his dignity, taught that boundaries are the ultimate act of self-respect. If someone handed your body to a passerby, you'd be outraged. Why hand over your mind? When she pushes with "you're controlling because you voiced a need," don't backtrack. A simple "I'm stating preferences," not demands the difference matters. Assert your stance without escalating conflict. The magic lies in tone. Seneca wrote that a gentle hand directs the wildest horse, and the same applies here. Imagine her testing your patience with chronic lateness. Blaming "you're so disrespectful" puts her on defense, but framing it as a shared standard, "I value punctuality, let's both commit to that," invites alignment without accusation. That's the Stoic balance, boundaries that protect your peace while leaving room for her autonomy. Here's the deeper truth: people test where they sense weakness. The woman who says "you're too serious" when you decline reckless plans isn't judging you, she's probing your resolve. The Stoic doesn't justify or argue. He smiles and says, "I know what works for me." That quiet consistency does more than pass her test. It teaches her how to treat you, because the man who sets boundaries with kindness isn't just demanding respect. He's demonstrating it. Humor was one of Marcus Aurelius' most underrated tools, not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet wit that cuts tension without drawing blood. Picture this: as emperor, he faced constant flattery from senators competing for favor. Where lesser men might have bristled or preened, Marcus disarmed them with dry quips. When one advisor groveled excessively, he reportedly replied, "If you knew how little I care, you'd save your breath." That's Stoic humor in action, a reminder that absurdity loses its power when you shine a light on it. Apply this to her tests when she drops a loaded question like, "Would you even notice if I disappeared?" The instinct is to plead, "Of course I would." Or protest, "Why would you say that?" But Marcus would likely chuckle and counter with something like, "I'd notice the peace and quiet first." Suddenly, the dramatic tension snaps like a rubber band stretched too thin. This isn't about dismissing her feelings or turning everything into a joke. It's about refusing to let tests hijack your emotional equilibrium. Epictetus, who endured slavery with his spirit intact, taught that humor is a form of perspective, a way to shrink problems down to their true size. Imagine her sighing dramatically, "You never take anything seriously." The insecure response is to overcorrect, suddenly somber and overly intense, the Stoic response. A grin and a playful, "I take not taking things seriously very seriously." That paradoxical twist doesn't mock her, it gently exposes the absurdity of the either-or trap she's setting. The secret lies in tone. Ancient Stoics distinguished between eutrapelia, good-natured wit, and bomolochia, crude mockery. When she tests you with, "I bet you're texting 5 other girls right now," sarcasm, "Only 6. Escalates defensiveness but light irony. "I'm actually juggling flaming swords while texting multitasking champion here," shifts the mood without malice. It signals you're unshaken by her probe while keeping the atmosphere playful. Chrysippus, the third head of Stoicism, believed humor was so vital he wrote entire books on it. His lost works praised laughter as the shortest distance between two minds, a way to bridge tension without confrontation. Here's the practical magic: humor works because it's unexpected. Tests thrive on predictable reactions: anger, explanation, validation seeking. A well-timed quip short-circuits that script. Take the classic, "You're too nice, it's boring" jab. The usual paths: turning cold to prove you're not nice or doubling down on people-pleasing, both fail. But a deadpan, "I'll start charging for the kindness next time," reframes her critique as a compliment, leaving her nowhere to go. Even Marcus, facing betrayal and plague, scribbled in his journal, "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy, but the best humor is to reveal the joke was on them all along." The key is to anchor humor in warmth, not weaponry. When Seneca's friends tried to provoke him with gossip, he'd listen intently, then ask, "Shall I file this under facts or creative writing?" That's the balance: playful enough to dissolve tension, respectful enough to keep connection alive. Next time she throws a test, channel the Stoics. See the ridiculousness lurking beneath the drama, and let a smile be your shield. Because the man who can laugh without cruelty isn't just passing her test. He's showing her how little power it ever really had. Epictetus, born a slave and crippled by his master's cruelty, discovered something extraordinary. The only thing we truly own is our ability to choose how we respond. This wasn't just philosophy, it was his lifeline. His famous dichotomy of control, carved from hardship, is your secret weapon against her tests. Picture this: she gives you the silent treatment, or she compares you to an ex, or she says, "Prove you're not like other guys." The untrained mind frantically scrambles to fix, to convince, to win. But Epictetus whispers, what part of this is yours to control? Her silence, her comparisons. Her expectations, none of it. Your interpretation, your patience, your refusal to dance to her tune. That's your empire. This distinction isn't theoretical, it's liberation in action. When she drops a challenge like, "You wouldn't last a day in my world," most men hear a gauntlet thrown, something to overcome. The Stoic hears a distraction. He doesn't argue, "Yes, I would," or plead, "Give me a chance." He smiles and thinks, her opinion of my endurance isn't mine to manage. That's the shift. Tests lose their fangs when you stop treating them as verdicts and start seeing them as whether unpredictable, passing, and utterly separate from your core. Epictetus put it brutally, "You're not hurt by what happens, but by your opinion of it." Her comment isn't the knife, your belief that it cuts is. Here's the practical magic. The next time she says something designed to provoke, I bet you'd walk away if things got hard. Pause. Mentally sort it into Epictetus' 2 buckets. Not my control, her doubt. My control, how I carry myself. Then respond from the second bucket. A simple, I guess time will tell, with unshakable calm, does more than any grand gesture. Why? Because you've just shown her that her test doesn't govern your self-worth. You're free not because you passed, but because you stopped needing to. The ancient Stoics trained for this like athletes. Every morning they'd rehearse. Today I'll meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, but none of these things can touch my will. That's your preparation. When she cancels plans last minute, or questions your loyalty, or plays hot and cold, you're not caught off guard. You've already designated these as external events, no different than rain or traffic. Your energy stays reserved for what you command, your integrity, your actions, your peace. Epictetus' most radical lesson. Freedom isn't achieved by satisfying desires, but by destroying them. In dating terms, the less you need her approval to feel whole, the more powerfully you connect, because the man who doesn't require her validation, he's the one she can't help but validate. Not by playing her game, but by redesigning the board. Inner freedom isn't indifference, it's the quiet certainty that no test can measure what you already know you're worth. Here's the twist most men miss. Her tests aren't problems to solve, they're gifts in disguise. The Stoics had a radical practice called premeditatio malorum, where they'd mentally rehearse adversity to drain its power. But they paired it with something even more transformative, gratitude for the very challenges they prepped for. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle is the way," but he also scribbled, "Give thanks for all things." That's the key. When she throws a curveball, whether it's a sudden cold shoulder or a loaded, "You're not like other guys," you have a choice. You can resent it, or you can see it as a drill instructor forcing you to level up. Take the classic hot and cold dynamic. One day she's texting constantly, the next she's radio silent. The knee-jerk reaction is frustration. Why can't she just be consistent? But the Stoic flips it. He opens his journal and writes, "I'm grateful for her inconsistency," because then he fills in the blank. Maybe it's, "It reminds me my peace shouldn't depend on her moods." Or, "It trains me to value my own company as much as hers." This isn't fake positivity. It's alchemy transforming friction into fuel. Epictetus, who was beaten and crippled as a slave, taught that difficulty shows what men are. Her tests aren't arbitrary. They're revealing who you're choosing to become under pressure. Try this tonight. After a tense interaction, grab a notebook and answer 3 questions. 1. What did this teach me about my triggers? 2. Where did I handle it well? 3. How did this make me stronger? Let's say she hit you with "You're too intense." Your entry might read, "Trigger, fear of being too much." Win, "I didn't apologize for my enthusiasm." Strength, "I now know intensity isn't a flaw, it's a filter." Suddenly, her critique isn't a wound, it's a mirror showing you where to own your authenticity. Seneca took this further. He'd write thank you letters to people who wronged him, not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he recognized their role in his growth. You don't have to go that far, but imagine texting her after a conflict. "Hey, I was thinking about our talk last night. Tough convos aren't fun, but I appreciate that we can have them." That shift from resenting tests to respecting their purpose changes everything. It's not about her anymore, it's about who you're becoming in response. The Stoics believed gratitude was the ultimate hack for emotional resilience. Why? Because you can't resent what you've already thanked. When you start seeing her mixed signals as reminders to trust yourself, her provocations as workouts for your patience, her silences as invitations to enjoy solitude, something unexpected happens. The tests stop feeling like obstacles and start feeling like, well, gifts. Harshly wrapped maybe, but gifts all the same. Marcus Aurelius said it best, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Her tests, they're not blocking your path, they are the path to becoming the man no test can shake. Imagine a stone dropped into a still pond. the ripples don't just radiate outward, they eventually return to the center, changed by everything they've touched. That's the power of emotional stability in action. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who navigated Nero's court without losing his integrity, observed something profound about human dynamics. We are mirrors to each other. When she tests you with unpredictability, sudden silence, sharp words, or mixed signals, your reaction doesn't just answer the test, it reshapes the entire interaction. Most men think passing tests is about saying the right thing. The Stoic knows it's about being the right force, one so steady it recalibrates her emotional gravity. Take the classic push-pull dynamic. She withdraws affection, watching to see if you'll chase or crumble. The anxious response, pleading texts, frantic attempts to fix things, only confirms her fear that your stability depends on her moods. But the Stoic response, quiet consistency, you mirror back calm instead of chaos. A simple, "I'm here when you're ready," does more than a dozen desperate messages. Why? Because Seneca taught that emotions are contagious. When you refuse to match her turbulence with your own, you're not just resisting the test, you're offering her an alternative script. Over time, that stability becomes a lifeline she starts reaching for. This isn't manipulation, it's leadership. Think of Seneca's letters to Lucilius, where he described patience as the antidote to anger. When she snaps, you never listen. The instinct is to defend, I do, or counterattack, you don't either. But the man grounded in Stoic stability pauses. He might say, "Tell me what you need me to hear," with the same tone you'd use to steady a spooked horse. That neutrality, free of defensiveness or blame, does something remarkable. It escalates the charge in her words, not because you're placating her, but because you're demonstrating how to navigate conflict without combustion. The reciprocity Seneca wrote about isn't transactional, it's transformational. Like a fire that warms those who gather around it, your emotional consistency creates a space where her tests lose their edge. Picture this, she hits you with, "You probably don't even care." The reactive man oversells his concern. "How can you say that? I'd do anything for you." Which ironically makes his care feel performative. The Stoic responds with warm certainty. You know that's not true. No drama, no negotiation, just a quiet reminder that her attempts to provoke doubt won't find fertile ground in you. Here's the neuroscience behind it. Mirror neurons, the brain's empathy circuits, wire us to sync with the emotional energy of those around us. When you meet her chaos with calm, you're not just protecting your peace, you're subtly inviting her nervous system to downshift. Seneca saw this play out in Rome's political arena. Advisors would come to him agitated, and within minutes they'd match his measured cadence. He wrote, "Tranquility is a choice, but it's also a gift we give others." Apply that to dating. Her test might start as a spark, but your stability decides whether it ignites a wildfire or dissolves into smoke, the ultimate irony. The less you need her to regulate your emotions, the more she'll trust you to regulate hers. That's the virtuous cycle. Every time you respond to provocation with patient clarity, like answering, "We can talk," when the tone shifts to a sarcastic jab, you're not just passing a test. You're teaching her what safety feels like, and people don't test what they already trust. Seneca's final lesson on this cuts deepest. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Her tests often spring from unspoken fears of abandonment, of unmet needs, of history repeating. Your emotional stability isn't a wall to keep her out. It's a bridge showing her those fears don't have to dictate the relationship. Because the man who remains unshaken by storms isn't just proving his strength. He's offering her a harbor, and harbors, unlike tests, are places people return to, not because they have to, but because they know they can. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who lived like a philosopher king despite exile and persecution, had a radical teaching for his students. The man who depends on another for his happiness is no better than a slave. That's the heart of Way 20, realizing her tests only have power when you've handed her the keys to your self-worth. Imagine this scenario. She casually mentions, "My ex used to bring me flowers every Friday," watching for your reaction. The approval-seeking man hears a challenge and rushes to outperform a ghost. The Stoic, he pauses, then replies, "That's a nice tradition. I prefer surprises." No defensiveness, no competition, just quiet assurance that his worth isn't up for debate. This isn't about indifference, it's about sovereignty. Musonius taught that dependency distorts relationships, turning partners from equals into mutual masters and slaves. When you need her validation to feel complete, every interaction becomes a test to pass. But when you anchor your confidence in actions you control, your integrity, your growth, your principles, her opinions become weather reports, interesting data, not commandments. Epictetus, who studied under Musonius, put it sharply, "Seeking the good of others is noble, needing their approval is chains." Here's how this plays out in practice. She hits you with, "You're not as ambitious as I'd like." The insecure man scrambles to list his achievements or vow to do better. The Stoic reflects, is this feedback or a power play? If there's truth in it, he'll consider growth not to win her favor but to align with his own standards. If it's manipulation, he might smile and say, "I chase my goals at my pace, but I appreciate the concern." That subtle shift from "please validate me" to "I'll decide what matters" changes everything. Musonius took this further in his lectures. He'd challenge students to practice what he called self-sufficiency drills, spending days alone without distraction, eating simple meals, wearing plain clothes. Why? To prove happiness wasn't borrowed from external sources. Apply that to dating. When she withdraws affection to test your stability, the man who's practiced solitude doesn't panic. He thinks, "I enjoyed my life before her, I'll enjoy it with or without her." That's not coldness, it's the warmth of inner abundance. The irony is palpable. The less you need her approval, the more authentically you connect. Marcus Aurelius saw this in politics. Senators who groveled for the emperor's favor were dismissed as weak. Those who stood firm in their values, they earned respect without asking. The same applies here. When she says, "You don't seem to care what I think," the Stoic doesn't reflexively reassure. He might reply, "I care about you deeply, but my self-respect isn't negotiable." That's the balance Musonius championed: engagement without enslavement. Modern psychology confirms this ancient wisdom. Studies on locus of control show that people who derive self-worth internally report higher relationship satisfaction. Why? Because they engage from choice, not fear. When her tests come, whether it's jealousy probes, "You'd probably flirt with her if I wasn't here," or commitment traps, "Prove you're serious about me," the internally validated man doesn't perform. He chooses. He might laugh off the jealousy comment with, "You give me too much credit," or meet the commitment test with, "I show my seriousness through actions, not promises." Either way, he's not feeding the test, he's redefining the terms. Musonius reserved his harshest critique for men who trade their souls for affection. He told students, "Would you sell your eyes for gold? Then why trade your self-respect for fleeting praise?" That's the litmus test. When she withholds approval through silence, criticism, or comparisons, ask yourself, am I trying to earn her respect or prove my own? The moment you stop treating her tests as verdicts and start seeing them as reflections of her own insecurities, the dynamic shifts. You're no longer a defendant in her courtroom. You're a free man walking past the courthouse doors. This is the ultimate Stoic paradox. The man who doesn't need her approval often becomes the one she can't stop admiring. Not because he plays the game better, but because he showed her the game was optional all along. As Musonius put it, freedom isn't given, it's claimed. And every test you meet with unshaken self-trust, that's not just passing, it's claiming. Imagine this, she fires off a text, "You're just like every other guy," and your stomach drops. Your fingers fly to defend, explain, or counterattack before your brain even catches up. That split-second reaction, that's the crack in your armor where tests slip through. The Stoics didn't just warn against this, they engineered a solution. Epictetus called it the gap, that sacred space between provocation and action where freedom lies. Most men lose power because they skip the gap entirely, mistaking speed for strength. But here's the truth: responding isn't slower reacting, it's strategic restraint. Let's dissect the anatomy of a reaction versus a response. A reaction is chemical heat flushes your face, your pulse hammers, words vomit out reflexively. It's what happens when she sighs, "I knew you wouldn't understand," and you snap back, "You never even give me a chance." A response, though, that's architectural. You feel the heat. Yes, Stoicism isn't about numbness, but you channel it. Maybe you inhale through your nose, count 3 heartbeats, then reply, "Help me understand better." See the shift. One hands her the remote control to your emotions, the other keeps it firmly in your grip. Marcus Aurelius left himself a journal reminder for moments like these. Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. That's the Stoic pause in action. When she drops a grenade like, "My ex would have fought for me," your lizard brain screams to duel the ghost. But pause, let the silence stretch, then build your response brick by brick. I'm not here to compete with ghosts, I'm here to be present with you. No venom, no desperation, just a boundary wrapped in clarity. Now let's arm you with scripts for the trenches. Test, "You're too emotional." Reaction, "No, I'm not. You're the one who." Response, "I'd rather feel deeply than pretend I don't." Test, "You probably don't even miss me when I'm gone." Reaction, "Of course I do. How can you say that?" Response, "You'll know you're missed when you're welcomed back." Notice the patterns. Reactions beg for validation. Responses stand in it. The Stoic pause isn't passive, it's precision. Musonius Rufus trained his students to speak only after their anger had cooled enough to taste its own bitterness. Try this tonight. Next time she provokes, physically step away, not in avoidance but recalibration. Walk to the kitchen, pour water, feel the glasses chill. By the time you return, you'll have transformed from reactor to architect, because the man who masters the gap doesn't just pass her tests, he rewrites them. And in that quiet space between her words and your reply, that's where real power is forged. Marcus Aurelius kept a private journal filled with reminders to himself, not about conquering empires, but about conquering his own judgment. One of his most profound entries reads, "When someone offends you, ask yourself, what does their behavior reveal about their struggles?" That simple exercise, peeling back the surface of someone's actions to see the humanity beneath, is your secret weapon when her tests feel personal. Because every provocation, every mixed signal, every "I bet you'd walk away if things got hard" isn't really about you. It's a glimpse into her own battlefield of fears and past wounds. Let's break it down with the Stoic's lens. When she suddenly pulls away after intimacy or makes a biting comment like, "You're just saying what I want to hear," the untrained mind takes the bait. It hears an accusation and either retreats into defensiveness or launches into overcorrection. But the Stoic pauses. He asks, what pain might be driving this? Maybe her last relationship was filled with empty promises. Maybe she's been taught that closeness always ends in abandonment. This isn't about excusing hurtful behavior, it's about understanding its roots. Here's where Marcus' empathy becomes tactical. Picture this scenario. She tests you with, "You'd probably cheat if you had the chance." The knee-jerk reaction is outrage. "How could you think that of me?" But the Stoic response starts with curiosity. That's a heavy assumption. Where's that coming from? That subtle pivot does something remarkable. It redirects the energy from confrontation to connection, not by ignoring the barb, but by recognizing it as the flinch of someone who's been burned. Marcus wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike the one who hurt you." When you meet her distrust with patience instead of matching her intensity, you're not just passing a test, you're showing her a new blueprint for trust. The brilliance of this approach lies in its ripple effect. Most power struggles in relationships feed on reciprocal reactions. She pushes, you shove, the cycle escalates. But compassion interrupts that loop. Think of it like judo. Instead of resisting her force head-on, you redirect it with awareness. When she says, "You're too good to be true," dripping with skepticism, you don't perform to prove her wrong. You might respond, "Sounds like you've met some convincing fakes before." Suddenly, the subtext shifts from "prove yourself" to "I see you." History offers a striking parallel. When Cato the Younger was spat on in the Roman Senate, he didn't retaliate. He wiped his face and said, "I will swear to anyone that you are not a man of clean lips." The insult became a mirror for the insulter. Apply that to her tests. The woman who needles you with "you don't really know me" isn't pushing you away, she's revealing how often she's felt misunderstood. Your calm, "then help me know you better," doesn't just answer the test, it answers the unmet need behind it. This isn't about playing therapist or tolerating toxicity. It's about recognizing that tests often masquerade as cries for reassurance. Marcus' meditations repeatedly circle back to one theme. We're all fragments of the same universe, struggling to make sense of our broken edges. When she says, "You'll leave when you find someone better," she's not assessing your loyalty, she's confessing her fear of inadequacy. The Stoic doesn't feed that fear with grand promises. He anchors it with quiet certainty. "I'm not here to comparison shop." Practical exercise. Next time she throws a test, mentally zoom out. See the little girl who learned to armor up because vulnerability got her hurt. See the woman who's been taught that love is conditional. Then respond to her, not the test, because the ultimate paradox, the moment you stop seeing her provocations as attacks and start seeing them as wounded parts speaking, she'll have fewer wounds to test with. As Marcus scribbled in the dead of night, be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. The strictness isn't harshness, it's the discipline to choose empathy even when she's handing you reasons not to. Picture a ship in a storm, waves crashing, wind howling, the crew scrambling while the captain stands motionless at the helm, eyes locked on the distant lighthouse. That's the power of purpose. The Stoics didn't just preach about having a mission, they built their entire philosophy around it. Marcus Aurelius called it your inner citadel, the unshakable core that keeps you oriented when everything around you feels chaotic. Apply this to her tests. When she throws a curveball, sudden silence, a provocative comment, a comparison to an ex, it's not about the test itself. It's about whether you've anchored yourself to something deeper than her approval. Let's get brutally practical here. Imagine she hits you with, "You care more about your work than me." The man without purpose hears an accusation and scrambles to prove his devotion, cancel meetings, rearrange priorities, hand her the reins to his self-worth. But the man who's built his life around a mission, he pauses. He doesn't apologize for his ambition, he contextualizes it. "My work matters to me because it's how I contribute to the world." But that doesn't mean you don't. That's the difference between reacting to her test and responding from principle. Clarity of purpose doesn't make you indifferent, it makes you intentional. History's greatest Stoics lived this. Cato the Younger could have compromised his values to placate Caesar and save his life. Instead, he chose death because his purpose, defending the Roman Republic, was non-negotiable. You're not facing life or death stakes here, but the dynamic is identical. Every time she tests you with "prove you love me," demands or guilt trips over time spent on your passions, you're at a crossroads. Do you fold to keep peace, or do you gently but firmly align with your North Star? Epictetus put it plainly. If you try to be everything to everyone, you'll end up nothing to anyone, including yourself. Here's the secret no one tells you. Purpose isn't just about big life goals. It's about micro-alignments. When she says, "You're not like other guys," with a tone that implies it's a flaw, the purposeless man morphs to fit her ideal. The man grounded in mission, he smiles and says, "I'd hope not," because he knows his worth isn't defined by how well he mimics her past relationships. He's too busy building his future. Think of Marcus Aurelius again, the most powerful man in Rome, yet he wrote nightly reminders to stay focused. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, that's the mantra when her tests come, not how do I make her happy, but how does this moment serve the man I'm becoming? Purpose acts like a filter. The trivial tests dramatic silences. Jealousy games bounce off because you're too engaged in meaningful pursuits to sweat small power struggles. Try this exercise tonight. Write down 3 non-negotiables that define your mission. Maybe it's integrity, creative expression, or service to others. Then replay her last test through that lens. When she sighed, "You're too serious about everything," was she challenging your values or revealing her own lack of depth? When she teased, "You drop me for your goals," was it a trap or an opportunity to articulate your priorities? Purpose doesn't just put tests in perspective, it makes them irrelevant, because the man who knows where he's going doesn't need to beg for directions from someone who's just passing through. Seneca said it best, "If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable." Her tests are just wind. They can either blow you off course or fill your sails, depending on how firmly you're holding the wheel. And when she sees you steady amid the gusts, that's when the tests stop, not because you passed them, but because you showed her they were never about you to begin with. Letting go of scorekeeping isn't about forgetting, it's about reclaiming your peace. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who survived exile and the treachery of Nero's court, wrote extensively on this. To be wronged is nothing unless you continue to remember it. Think about the last time she tested you, maybe with a sudden cold shoulder or a backhanded compliment. The instinct is to file it away, to keep a mental ledger of every slight, ready to be tallied up later. She cancelled plans last time, so I'll make her wait now. She compared me to her ex, so I'll subtly remind her of her flaws. But here's what Seneca understood: scorekeeping doesn't balance anything. It just chains you to the past while giving her tests free rent in your mind. Consider Seneca's own life. After being exiled to Corsica on false charges, he could have spent years plotting revenge. Instead, he wrote letters on the liberating power of forgiveness, not because his accusers deserved it, but because he deserved to move forward. Apply that to dating. When she throws a test like, "You're not as attentive as you used to be," you have a choice: weaponize the past, "Well, you're not as easy to please as you used to be," or follow Seneca's lead. A simple "I hear you, let's focus on how we can both feel valued now" doesn't just diffuse the jab, it dissolves the entire game. The Stoic distinction here is critical. Forgiveness isn't absolution for her behavior, it's sovereignty over your emotional energy. Marcus Aurelius framed it as wiping the imaginary slate clean each morning. Imagine she's inconsistent hot one day, distant the next. The scorekeeper obsesses over patterns. This is the 3rd time she's done this, while the Stoic asks, what's the most constructive response to this moment, independent of the past? That shift from accountant to architect changes everything, because resentment doesn't punish her, it punishes you, replaying old wounds long after she's moved on. Seneca's most radical insight: the best revenge is to not imitate the one who hurt you. When she tests you with passive aggression, say, "I wouldn't expect you to notice what I need." The petty response mirrors her tone. "I wouldn't expect you to communicate clearly." But the Stoic response, neutral, unflinching, breaks the cycle. "I'd notice more if you told me directly." No sarcasm, no ledger, just a quiet invitation to rise above the pattern. Practical exercise: next time you catch yourself mentally replaying her tests, try Seneca's premeditated release. Write the incident down, then physically tear it up. The act isn't magical, it's symbolic, a reminder that holding on is optional. As Seneca put it, you're not damaged by what happens, but by your persistence in preserving it. Here's the paradox: the moment you stop keeping score, you win. Not because she changes, but because you've reclaimed the only thing ever truly yours: your attention. The tests may continue, but their power to distract, to linger, to matter, that's yours to give. And the man who chooses to give nothing, he's the one who walks away with everything. There comes a point where passing her tests becomes irrelevant, not because you've grown indifferent, but because you've become the kind of man who no longer triggers the need for them. This is the ultimate Stoic paradox. The less you react to her provocations, the fewer she'll throw your way. Think of it like a dance where one partner stops stepping on the other's feet. Suddenly, the rhythm smooths out and the tension dissolves. Marcus Aurelius never had to convince anyone of his integrity. He simply lived it so consistently that doubts withered from lack of fuel. That's the power of leading by example. When your actions align so seamlessly with your principles that there's no gap between who you are and who you appear to be, tests lose their purpose. Imagine this shift in practice. She's accustomed to partners who oscillate between neediness and detachment, so she instinctively prods with comments like, "You're too comfortable without me." The old dynamic would have you scrambling to prove your investment, texting more, planning grand gestures, dimming your light to make her feel brighter. But the Stoic approach, steady presence. You don't counter her skepticism with performances, you meet it with unwavering consistency. Maybe you reply, "I'm comfortable with myself. That doesn't mean I don't value you." No defensiveness, no drama, just a mirror reflecting back the stability she's never been handed before. This isn't manipulation, it's magnetism. Ancient Stoics called it teaching by silence, the art of letting your character speak louder than your explanations. Take the classic test of jealousy. She mentions running into an ex, watching for your reaction. Most men either overcorrect with forced indifference, cool, I don't care, or spiral into interrogation mode. What did he say? Are you seeing him again? The man rooted in Stoic self-possession, he nods and says, "Hope it wasn't awkward for you." That simple response does three things at once. It acknowledges her experience without feeding insecurity, demonstrates emotional security, and subtly signals that her past doesn't threaten your present. Suddenly, the test collapses under its own weight. Here's the neuroscience behind it. Humans are prediction machines. We constantly assess whether someone's behavior aligns with their words. Every time you respond to provocation with equanimity, you seem upset, want to talk about it. Instead of, "Why are you always like this?" you're rewiring her expectations. Consistency builds trust, and trust dismantles the need for tests. Epictetus saw this in his students. Those who complained least about others' behavior often inspired the most change in them. Don't speak much about what a good man should be, he advised, but be one. The ripple effect is profound. When she tosses a grenade like, "You'll never really understand me," and you respond with patient curiosity, "Then help me try," instead of frustration, you're not just answering the test, you're modeling how to communicate without games. Over time, she'll either rise to meet that standard or reveal her unwillingness to grow. Either way, you've transformed the dynamic from adversarial to aspirational. History's greatest Stoics proved this truth through extremes. Cato the Younger's enemies mocked his rigid principles until they found themselves unconsciously straightening their postures in his presence. Your influence won't require Roman austerity, but the principle holds. Embodying virtue quietly elevates everyone around you. When she sees that your calm isn't a tactic but your default state, that your boundaries aren't walls but expressions of self-respect, something shifts. The tests that once felt necessary start to feel unnecessary. The final lesson is this: you don't pass her tests by playing her game better. You end them by changing the game entirely, not through words but through being. Because the man who lives by Stoic principles doesn't just navigate storms, he becomes the eye of the hurricane, untouched by the chaos swirling around him. And in that stillness, she'll either find the safety to drop her guard or the clarity to walk away. Both outcomes are victories, one for the relationship, the other for your peace. Either way, you win. So there you have it, 25 ways Stoicism doesn't just help you pass her tests, but transforms them into stepping stones for becoming unshakable. Remember, this isn't about gaming the system or outmaneuvering her, it's about mastering yourself. Each challenge, whether it's her silence, her provocations, or her mixed signals, is an invitation to practice emotional resilience, clarity, and unwavering self-respect. You've learned how to pause instead of react, how to reframe instead of resent, and how to stand firm without standing still. These aren't just dating skills, they're life skills. Because the man who can navigate the turbulence of relationships with stoic poise, he's the same man who thrives in chaos, excels under pressure, and remains unbroken by whatever life throws his way. Now here's your challenge. Pick one of these techniques, just one, and practice it daily for the next week. Maybe it's the pause before reacting, or the art of negative visualization, or simply asking yourself, is this within my control? Whatever you choose, commit to it. Watch how it shifts not just your relationships, but your entire mindset. And when you see the results, when you catch yourself smiling at a test that once would have derailed you, come back and share your story in the comments. Let's build a community of men who don't just survive these moments, but grow stronger because of them. We'll leave you with this from Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's wisest teachers. Difficulty shows what men are. Therefore, when a difficulty befalls you, remember that you are being shown your own strength. Her tests aren't obstacles, they're the whetstones sharpening your edge. So embrace them, learn from them, and let them reveal the unshakable man you're becoming.